Welcome to the Soft Life with Sadie Baddies. Sadie Baddies is the antidote to mental health stigma, and this podcast is hosted by yours truly, Priscilla O. Adjaman. We are a virtual sanctuary centering Black and multiracial people, and we prioritize the mental and emotional nourishment that is the foundation of collective healing in our communities. Thank you for being here. So, Maribi, we're so happy to have you here with us, and thank you for coming onto the Soft Life. We would love to know how you're feeling in this moment. Describe what your vibe is. If there's any adjectives that resonate, please feel free to share them with us.
Yes, I'm feeling lots of joy and pride. I'm accomplishing a lot of things that I've always wanted and worked really hard towards. So it's a really fun era of my life. I'm feeling playful and curious in this new stage of my life. So there's a lot of fun happening on this end.
I love that. Definitely in our frolic era, I think the end of summer feels like
Yes.
that. Like you're just excited to, enjoy the last few days or last few weeks, I should say, of the good weather. And I love that you're still being productive and knocking out those goals this summer. What is your origin story in your own words? Like what city, what neighborhood resonates with you the most? Also your cultural background. We want to know all the things.
Yes. So I'm born and raised in Jersey City, New Jersey. I'm obsessed with my city and where I'm from. Like anybody who knows me is like, she's just so proud to be from Jersey. I'm like, yes, it's a city where everybody was from an immigrant family. Like everybody's parents were from somewhere else. And I think that was like the most beautiful thing. My parents are from the Dominican Republic. And so I grew up in a very Dominican household, grandparents, aunts and uncles, and little old me just running around all over the place. So it was a really fun time, and it um created a really firm foundation in like just understanding where I come from, um, and what my parents did to get here and why we're in the US. Like just it's the foundation of who I am is definitely a child of immigrant parents for sure.
I love that. I'm a Jersey girl too, so I resonate with the Jersey pride. And I love when, you meet a fellow Jersey girl and she's proud of where she's from, but also really exciting to hear like the upbringing you had in a very diverse neighborhood and growing up with people that looked like you and had the same kind of cultural experience as you, being product of immigrants. So very exciting to hear that. Can you tell us more about what your journey was like into becoming a therapist?
Yeah, it's a long journey. And at least for me specifically, this is my second career. I have a background in higher education. I was in that college access space and then became an academic advisor and was on the campus for at least I want to say 7 years, just in that working in that space. So my students really, really inspired me. I was one of the only people of color on the campus where students had kind of come to and feel connected to in their experiences, about being the first in their families to go to college and trying to figure out the registration process and what classes do I need and what major and why am I here. There was just so many questions they were asking themselves, and they just needed a sounding board that they could trust. I noticed that I just had this kind of like talent, if you will, for like being able to hold space for heavier stories. But I didn't have the skill set. And so I
Mm.
had this amazing supervisor who also saw that talent, had a conversation with me, was like, we'll send you back to school. Like there's something that's happening here. Specifically because I would take them to the personal counselor on campus to kind of work through some of the deeper stuff. And they'd be like, no,
Hmm.
you. I'm like, but I can't do this with you. Like there's a responsibility, to making sure that your mental health is taken seriously and it's in the hands of a professional who knows exactly what to do with it. So I went back to school. I did the Master's of Social Work program at Rutgers and took the clinical route. And I did that while working full time, which was a journey that I didn't do alone. My community really had to step up for me, even to like help me take care of basic needs like cleaning my space and laundry and making sure I
Mm-hmm.
was fed because I was working my 40 hours, doing my clinical hours, and going to school.
It's a lot.
Um,
Yeah.
it is, but it was like, this is hard work. That's what I always tell people. And it's like,
Mm.
you have to know that this is serious. Number one, you have to take it seriously and you have to have heart
Mm-hmm.
to go through that program. It's like, and to make it to the end and to really walk
Yeah.
into this work as a therapist. So that was my journey in terms of how I got here.
I
And I'm
love
happy
that
to be
phrase that you
here.
just, thank you. Thank you for sharing. And I love the phrase that you just used of hard work because at first it sounds like you were saying hard work, which I'm like, yeah, but heart work in itself shows that you have to have that level of empathy and passion in order to pursue something that has delayed gratification in a way. So I
Yeah.
really love that
Yeah.
mentality. And you made it on the other side. So that's what's important.
Yes, yes. And then for anybody who's curious as to how you actually become, so once you finish the program, you do your hours, you take your
Hmm.
test, then you do more hours. So, and you're supervised the entire time. So it
Hmm.
takes a really long time to become a therapist. And I don't think people recognize or realize that. So, anybody who's curious, I'm always welcome to like, go ahead, hit me up, and I'll tell you about how the process goes. I don't feel like people really know.
Yeah. No, it's really helpful to have people who have already been through the experiences that we might be curious about or questioning, and then have the representation of someone that looks like you that also went through it and maybe had similar challenges and experiences. So I will definitely leave your information so that people can reach out to you if they have any questions about that route that you took to become a therapist. So I would love to hear more about how you started Project Chula and the inspiration behind it. I love the name, and would love to know what inspired you to start Project Chula and how it's created its own community and space
Right.
that you've initiated.
I was 19 when I started. It was a blog called Don't Call Me Chula. I was an
Mm,
undergrad at Rutgers and just participating in amazing conversations that I never really got to have back at home, and sharing in my experiences and just curiosities about the world. And it was a playoff of like, don't call me baby, but I'm like, all right, but I'm like not white, so don't call me chula.
mm,
I identified as a pretty hardcore, not I want to say hardcore, but just as a feminist at the time, and um, I just had a lot on my mind through that I wanted to share based off of my cultural experiences, based off of what I was taught at home and what I was learning, and wanting to make a world of my own online and share it with other maybe Latinas who were born in the US and also had this struggle of like figuring out like what's the type of woman that I want to be. Specifically, it was around womanhood. Like, what's the type of woman I want to be? What type of womanhood do I want to celebrate? I see this type at home that maybe I don't necessarily doesn't resonate with me, but I also see this other type that doesn't necessarily resonate with me. And I was just taking so many like good classes at the time, so I needed a space to write about it, talk about it,
hmm.
and create community around it. And so that's how Don't Call Me Chula came to be when I was on campus. And then it evolved beyond that because my like friends, my guy friends were interacting with it a lot and people were asking me a lot of questions. And so lots of conversation was happening around the topics that I was curious about.
Hmm.
So as I got older, I had for my first experiences in the job market were like super funky because again, I graduated like an English lit major and like sociology. It's like, what kind of job was I looking for? So I decided, you know what, I want to start an EMAG and I'm going to call it Project Chula again, based off of that same spirit that the blog
Hmm.
had when I was in college. And so I started an EMAG and it did kind of well, I guess, for the time. We're talking about like this is 2011, 2012 at the time.
Hmm.
So that's how I got the name. Because I was like, well, what would I name it? Don't call me Chula, that's too long. So it was just
Yeah.
like, this is my project. My project was, again, I'm creating this space online and I'm evolving it. Um, and it's Project Chula. And this is just a continuous like cycle of evolving what Chula is supposed to be. And she's an embodiment of like me and what I wish I
Yeah.
had at 19, basically, and that space.
I love that. Also, just shout out to the people who were the early adapters of like blogs. Like, now we have
That's
Substack and everyone's like, "Oh, I have a Substack." I'm like, "Okay, wait, did you have WordPress like back in the day because
what
that's the
I'm
original,
saying.
you
Okay.
know." Yeah. That's
WordPress
really
and typing,
yes.
yes,
Yeah. Yeah. That's so dope. I love that it's been able to evolve with you over the years and also represent not just where you were, fresh out of college, but who you are now as a woman who is providing support and resources for her community through the work that you do as a therapist. And I know that you specialize in Gen Z in population in terms of your work as a therapist. And I'm very curious to know what is the difference between the mental health care needs in the Gen Z population versus their millennial counterparts? Like, what are the differences that you see between the
right.
two?
By this point, like millennials are definitely deeper into adulthood, right? Like a lot of us are in our 30s, there's just different work being done in that
Hmm.
space. I don't think it's so different though to work with millennials and Gen Z, but Gen Z is just in a space of their life where they're more curious, they're exploring identity, sexuality, they're just exploring and questioning and curious about everything, right? So the stage of life is different for millennials versus Gen Z. Um, and as a millennial myself, I love being able to guide Gen Z through those questions because I had so many. I still do, right?
Hmm.
And I celebrate their exploration of like, what does work-life balance look like? I'm out, by X amount of time. Like this
Yeah.
job ain't working for me. I figured that out in 2 days. Like I'm out. Like there's
Yeah.
something that's brewing and there's something that's beautiful there. Do I think a little balance is necessary? Yes. And so that's where we come in as millennials to be like, yo, just a slight reminder that, okay, like I hear you. And so let me ask questions. Let me see where you're coming from and let me share my experience. And to be frank, wisdom, right? Because I've been there, done that. And so that's my love for working with Gen Z is I love their energy. I love like they're what's supposed to happen right now. These questions are supposed to happen. These actions are supposed to happen. And they're breaking barriers that I think are really, really cool. And so that's I hope I answered your question, but yeah,
Yeah.
that's the difference, and that's my love for working with Gen Z comes from that space of I see you, I celebrate
Yeah.
you. Like, okay, let's
Yeah.
let's let's talk about this. Let's have space for what
And
your thoughts are right now.
yeah, and in your experience, do you feel that your Gen Z um, demographic is more eager or more open to exploring or sticking with having a therapist and prioritizing their mental health that way because of the age of the internet? It's been normalized, the stigma's more removed, or would you say that there's still a little bit of work that has to be done when it comes to having them commit to, seeing a therapist or having treatment
Yeah,
for their mental health?
I definitely see that they're more open. Like a lot of the times, I'll ask the question, like, again, I work with teenagers a lot. So I'll ask the question, like, okay, I want to know whose idea is this? Was it your idea? Is it your parents' idea? Like, how are you here? And surprisingly enough, they're like, I asked to come to therapy. Some of
Mm,
them definitely still have trauma with therapists where maybe they experienced therapists at school or therapists in their childhood who just you know, didn't create a safe space for them for whatever reason. And so some folks
mhm.
are definitely like, again, a human experience, not open to it. But I'm seeing more and more like, no, I asked to come here. No, I looked you up. You just seemed like someone I thought I could connect with. And
Hmm.
I'm grateful that social media has opened up this conversation and kind of normalized the experience of going to therapy. So there's still a lot of work to be done in terms of getting people to understand why prioritizing your mental wellness is important. But it's growing. It's a cool thing to see as a
Yeah.
therapist. Yeah.
I'm sure. It also kind of in a way validates some of our experiences. For example, I'm a millennial myself and my younger sister's Gen Z. We're a decade apart, literally. So it kind of validates like when she does go through things or she's having experiences, I'm like, oh, but that was me too. In a way, seeing her deal with it, but I almost feel like with a little bit more self awareness than maybe that I
Yes.
had at the time, it makes me feel like validated in those experiences that I have, whether it's like work stuff or relationships or friends or other factors that are affecting like your mental health. It's really kind of a beautiful mirror to what our own experiences were at the time. So,
Absolutely. And I love that they have the language, they're learning the language and they're teaching each other
yeah.
the language, you know. They come into session with some insight and education that I didn't have at that
Hmm.
age. And we get to do the work of just making sure they understand what they're saying, and that they kind of have all of those terminologies right, because sometimes we learn something online and we just keep saying it over and over again. Okay, but let me actually make sure you understand what it means to be gaslit or all these things.
Yeah.
And so what a fun experience, really. I wish I had the resources that I feel like Gen Z has right now. When I was a teenager, and I think that's why I'm so passionate about working with teens. Like,
Hmm.
I just am so happy to be an adult in their life who's curious enough to want to know what you're going through, because I don't think I had enough adults in my life who were curious to know what I thought and what I felt, and and to remind me that I knew things, like things
Yeah.
at a teen age, and
Hmm.
you're just like surrounded by adults that are like, you don't know anything. No, there are things that
Yeah.
I know, right? I
Right.
experience the world differently than you do. And by the way, this is a different world that I'm living in than the one you were living in, right?
Yeah.
So I love being able to hear their insight on what's going on.
Absolutely. I think their insight is just as valuable as ours, right? Just because they don't have has as many years with their lived experiences doesn't mean that the shorter amount of years that they have lived is any less valuable or impactful to us in our world as well, not just their like kind of inner bubble sometimes. So,
Absolutely. There's a lot to learn. There's a lot to learn from the youth, for real.
yeah, absolutely. And as people who are first generation American, or people who are the product of immigrants, what are some of the unique challenges that they face when navigating their healing journey or approaching their mental health? How how do you see the unique challenges being someone who is maybe Caribbean or African or have that different factor in their identity from their counterparts?
Right. Um, I just feel like you question so many things. So, okay, you are born and raised in a household where maybe a language is different, your food is different, right? Like, I remember coming outside and my coat smelling like rice and beans or like pollo guisado. Like, somebody be like, your mom was cooking. Like, yes, my mom was cooking. Do you want some? Like, damn, right? And it just made you feel othered, right? From the very beginning of like, well, what'd you bring for lunch? What is that? Like, I learned what PB&J was at school. My mom's not at home making peanut butter and jelly, mac and cheese. Like, that's not something that's happening in my households, right?
Yeah.
So genuinely, you feel othered almost instantly. from the fact that people couldn't get my name right, from the fact that I even had to come up with an English pronunciation for my name. Well, I don't come up with it. I'm pretty sure like my
Mm-hmm.
kindergarten teacher did, and it just like stuck, right? Because there's no effort to figuring out how to say
Mm-hmm.
Maribi, right? Maribi. I like the English version of my name actually too, so I give people the option, but it's like the fact that you need an option, right?
Yeah.
So from the very beginning of time, you realize really quickly, like, oh, I'm different. I'm growing up differently. There's something here. There's an experience that I'm having that other people aren't having. So it makes you question a lot of things. Like, do I really know? Do my parents really know? You start to question them like, all right, but do you really know? Because this is like the American system. Is it like, it's probably not the same in DR. Which
Yeah.
kind of sucks. What a challenge for them. Like, I'm sorry, mom and dad. Like, you do some things that I'm over here questioning everything you do. I'm over here questioning everything I do because folks are questioning me. Um,
Yeah.
and that was an extra layer that, like, really, really sucked. There's just a normal amount of questioning you have just out of curiosity and you're exploring life. But then there was this extra layer of like distrust or mistrust, right? Like, can I trust myself to make the right decision? Because again, can I trust my parents to make the right decision for me? Because do we understand what's actually happening in the American system? We know the DR system really well. And I also am constantly hearing about the way things are done there. Like, so it's the constant building of trust with yourself, trust with your family, because you're also like from a young age playing translator. Not so much for
Yeah.
like, not so much for like my parents in my case. It was a lot for my grandparents, and
Mm-hmm.
maybe even a little bit more for like one parent than the other. My parents came here fairly young, I would say. They were like 18 and 19. And so for me, it was more of like, there's just so much responsibility that's on me at a young age. And it just felt like we were all figuring it out together. So that's the challenge of being first gen born in the US or even like born somewhere else but raised in the US is you alongside your family are part of the system of figuring it out and you recognize that everyone's just trying to figure it out for the first time, especially as I was in that process of like applying and going to college. Like I knew I had to go to college because I was one of the very first people in my family to go to college. And like it was just a thing that my parents were like, you have to get an education. Like we came here so that you could get this education. And this is a thing that you have to do because we didn't get to do. And it's like, great, now I have to do something you've definitely never done.
Yeah.
What? And I have to trust these people that don't look like me, that I don't think have been communicating in my high school experience that they care enough about me. I'm just gonna be honest, right? I went to like a all girls private school, so it wasn't like, because again, in communities like Jersey City, your parents are like, nah, we're making this effort to put you in the private school because the public
Mm-hmm.
school system is da 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 da. But that's where people look like me. So all right, cool. Now I gotta trust these older people to teach me how to get to college, but I don't know that they have my best interest at heart.
Yeah.
So again, mistrusting the system to do the best for me, but I have to still follow through and be a part of the system. So what an interesting experience, honestly.
I couldn't relate more in terms of the challenge of our parents wanting to put us in better situations, environments, especially if you kind of grew up in the suburbs or the city, right? And they have the choice. That's one of the biggest choices that parents make is what school they're putting their children into. And I
Right.
think when you're an immigrant, you don't always have that like kind of prior knowledge of what the schools are going to be like because you didn't grow up here, right? It's not like they can say, "Oh, we'll send them here because I went here or your mom went here or whoever." They're all learning this from the very beginning. So they're kind of betting on the choice that they make being the right one. But who's to say what is the right one, right? Is it worse? Are you worse off growing up in an environment where you have nobody that looks like you and people that question your worth, and there's this lack of cultural awareness that comes with being in predominantly white spaces or a space where you just feel othered. But then again, it's like you might feel like you belong, or you might feel that sense of familiarity doesn't have the same resources as the other school does, right? So you're kind of missing out
Right.
on things like going to the best college, or like sports or extracurricular activities that are going to help you in your future. So I have
Yeah.
so much grace for immigrant parents, especially me being first gen myself, and my parents coming from Ghana and just trying their best. And
Right.
their best is going to look like different than my best when I'm a parent one day, right? Like I'm going to have so much more options than they had when they came
Right.
here. So
Which is
it's
what
kind
they
of,
wanted for us, right?
yeah.
This is what they wanted, us to have more options. And the other layer I was going to add was safety, right? Like making the best choices that they can
Yes.
make to keep you safe.
Yeah.
Depending on like, I don't know how my folks landed from the Caribbean in Jersey City. I'm like, bro, like y'all didn't want to pick like Florida, like y'all didn't want to pick. I'm in Florida now, which is so funny. You work your way back to the
Yeah.
warm, but it's like, they didn't necessarily they just tried to protect you in every way possible and get this information from people they worked with and, what they heard in the community. So
Yes.
community played a really big role personally in my upbringing. The
Yeah.
church community, the Latino community in Jersey City, like my parents' like circle of trust all
Yeah.
played into the decisions that were made for me.
Absolutely.
um,
Same here. Same here.
you
It's
know,
so it's so funny that you actually mentioned the church community, because anyone that knows me knows that my parents go to church all the time. They're like very much devout, like churchgoers. And it's funny because over the years I've drifted away from, like going to a church and kind of like practicing that faith that I grew up in, and kind of was, I would say, like I inherited that type of faith. It wasn't really my own choice, but it's funny because that is their circle of trust. Those are the people that they would, like, if they had to pick somebody to maybe babysit you, or pick you up from school, or have like an emergency and they need to call someone. They don't have their core family all here that they can just
right.
call. They have to trust these other people to step in and kind of act as like additional support, or like an additional authority figure. So it's hard when you don't have your blood relatives around to help you with raising, like, your children. And the saying about it takes a village, their village is still, back home for a lot of them. So they're like, well, this is our new village, and you kind of have to
Yeah.
just go with it.
And I have so much empathy for the experience of like leaving everything that you know to start all
Yeah.
over again with like, I think about my dad often because he was the one that immigrated first. Just
Hmm.
being like, again, in his later teens, 18, 19 years old, and he just has his dad who we're still human. So God knows what that relationship looks like. You're in adolescence. All you have is your dad and an uncle in this cold ass place. Your friends are back home.
Yeah.
Your siblings are back home. You're the eldest. And then there's this responsibility or this pressure
Yeah.
to have to carry this legacy to this new level. And you have no idea how to do it. And you've got to
Yeah.
figure it out, you know? And then you get
Yeah.
married and you bring a wife, and now you're 20 something in this new city with another person. And now the
Yeah.
responsibility is even bigger. And you're just starting from zero. I
Yeah.
have so much empathy for that experience. I think about it often,
Me
honestly,
too. Me
you
too.
know?
Yeah, getting older, you start to empathize and kind of humanize your parents as well, and realize that a lot of them really had no clue. They might have acted like they had a clue, but they really had no clue what they were doing. And a lot of it was a risk, a very big risk that they took coming here. So,
Yeah. I'm so grateful. I'm so grateful. Um, that they went through that so that, again, bringing it back to so we can have the choices, so that we can
right.
have a more typical, I guess, childhood and
Yeah.
adolescent and upbringing experience. Like I got to have a lot of fun. I got to run the
Yeah.
streets and I got to play and I got to go to prom and I got to stress about a
Yeah.
dress. Like that was my biggest thing, right? And so shout out to immigrant parents, man. I don't know that they get the credit
Yeah.
that they deserve for doing the best
Yeah.
that they could with the information that they had. And Lord knows it wasn't as much information or resources as they needed at the time.
That's a fact. Shout out to them for real. Shout out to the all of them who came with just dreams of wanting something better and were able to give that to their children. Yeah, I don't take
Yeah.
that lightly either. Um, I speaking of though, like just the immigrant experience in particular, and first gen, and just having people that you work with that have the cultural background or similar cultural background as you and I would say. I want to talk about financial trauma because that is one of the biggest setbacks, I think, that a lot of people who are products of immigrants or first gen American deal with. And whether you come from a background of, having people in your family, your parents that struggled with their financial stability, or they just had maybe more of like a scarcity point of view when it came to finances and really just focusing on the bare minimum of what you needed to survive versus
Mm.
the other little things.
Mm-hmm.
Or whether, I've been seeing a lot of people open up about like now that they do make money and say like they went to college, they got the job, they live in the city they want to live in, they are dealing with lifestyle creep, which is basically when you start, it's a form of like inflation in your own life when you start to make more money and then you
Yes.
spend way more than you would have
Yes.
because of you're trying to live out the experiences you didn't have as a kid when your parents like couldn't afford certain things for you. So these are
Right.
people who struggle a lot with credit card debt or consumer debt. And it's not just the student loan debt, it's also like just the debt of trying to make yourself happy. I would love for you to touch on that because I think this is something that's very specific to Gen Z and to millennials. And if you could speak to kind of the financial anxiety, especially in this economic environment that we have right now, I think people would really appreciate hearing that coming from you.
Yeah. Um, so
I
many
know that was a big
things.
question.
I'm like, whoa, so many things, right? Again,
Yeah.
another branch of being the first. And as Gen Z and as millennials kind of go deeper, evolve more in their life from this very specific experience, right? Um, I'm thinking back to even the choice, because I don't feel like I had a choice personally in like going to college. I feel like that was just something that I knew I had to do. And it was about money. It was about you have to make money we've never
Yeah.
seen before. At least that was like somehow the message I got, even though it was never
Yeah.
directly said that way. We're here so we can experience a life that no one in our ancestral line potentially has experienced.
Yeah.
Okay. So we're going to get cars when folks never could buy a brand new car, or you're going to go to private school and you're going to get this amazing education that folks haven't been able to get because money was such a barrier to being able to have access to, a lifestyle. Like my folks are from the countryside, right? So getting to the city was like a really big thing to be able to get money that folks in the
Mm-hmm.
countryside have never seen and be able to have access to resources that they've never been able to have, right? Because we see it. We see lifestyles that other folks get to have in different social classes, right? And we want a piece of the pie. So you're constantly chasing the next best thing.
Mm-hmm.
So, I didn't know the terminology of the language, so thank you for giving me that language of like, okay, this challenge of now I'm in a new tax bracket and I want to get all the
Mm-hmm.
things.
Mm-hmm.
A couple of years ago, I got my first little Louis Vuitton bag, girl, and what a tough decision. And I cried at the store, and my mom is like, girl,
Oh,
you can get it. You can do this.
yeah.
Um, Anybody who knows my mom knows that she's like my hype woman. You could do this. This is what you worked for. You work hard for this, girl. Get yourself that bag. Get yourself that condo. Get yourself. My mom is
Yeah.
go ahead. And so she's on a whole nother. I'm like, Mom, I gotta
Yeah.
reel us back in because there's a
Reel
whole
it
other
back in.
reality because there's a mortgage
Yeah.
involved with getting that, and there's a this involved with getting that. And I have dug myself into financial holes where it's
Hmm.
hard to dig myself out of off of the you've got the one parent who's like, you can do it, girl. This is what we work for so you can have this certain lifestyle. And another parent who's so much he's so grounding, but he'd be like, that's dumb. Why are you in all that debt? That's stupid. How did you get there? Why? You need food and a place to live that's safe and clothes on your back. Why are you traveling so much, right? And trying to figure
Yeah.
out the balance between getting my needs met, my basic needs, right? And making sound choices, but also enjoying what we worked hard for. And I say we because we don't
Right.
do this alone. Like, y'all got me
Right.
to this point so that I can
Yeah.
enjoy this certain life, right?
Yeah.
It's harder because, like, also the other part of the experience is we're not getting married at 21 anymore, you
Mm-mm.
know? So, at least in particular, my generation, we're figuring out a lot of things by ourselves. There's no double income here to pay for this, inflated rent, and we're not getting the salaries that
Yeah.
to be able to change, to be able to catch up or keep up with the lifestyle changes that's happening so
Hmm.
rapidly in the economy, specifically after COVID. Like, I don't understand, but things just rapidly,
Yeah.
right? And we haven't had a chance to catch up, and we're doing it by ourselves
Yep.
a lot of the time, or needing to find support back with our parents when we expected to not have to do that anymore. A lot of
Yeah.
millennials are moving back in with their folks to kind of be able to figure out how to I manage this financial crisis that we're in. So there's a
Yeah.
lot of layers here. I don't know that we have enough time to to dig into all of it. But I want to say
Hmm.
I see you, like I see all of us that are going through it. It goes deep, and so don't be ashamed to get the emotional support to have these conversations with another person to kind of, again, give you feedback and be your sounding board while you're figuring
Hmm.
it out. I don't know that anyone else has lived what this particular generation is living right now.
No,
Again,
I would definitely say we are the first generation who's lived through so many unprecedented moments in history that have been televised, that have been Instagram
right.
live, that have been tweeted. But not only that, so there's like this heightened level of awareness that other generations didn't have, right? Like I think about me and my siblings, or just people that are in my age group, and we all experienced these huge monumental moments in the last decade or the last 15, 20 years, and we all heard about it at the exact same time, whereas somebody
Yes.
in a previous generation, maybe it took them a few days or even a few weeks to hear news about, oh, what's going on economically or in pop
Yes.
culture or globally, right? Like this is moving so much faster, and so there's this heightened awareness. And also, like you said, we have to like not feel ashamed if we need to see a therapist or see a financial advisor, or
Right.
there's people who are specifically financial trauma therapists that will help you to navigate through some of those mindsets and challenges that are preventing us from maybe adapting to where we are right now in our life. And
Right.
like, yeah.
And figuring out like your own relationship with money and what you want it to look like, right? What you think is a financially sound decision versus what your parents think, right? Because what
Yeah.
they had to do with their money was very different. At least like in the case of immigrant families, right? The goal was I gotta send money back. I gotta send products back
Mm-hmm.
that they don't have access to because now I have access to it and I gotta help
Mm-hmm.
you. And I adopted that mentality too of like, oh, I'm gonna access this money and it has to go back into my family, right? We're always
Mm-hmm.
thinking about going back to our family or going back to our community versus other folks have the privilege of not having to think about money
Mm-hmm.
going backwards. Their money gets to go forward. It gets to stay independently, autonomously with them, and then moving forward to their future generation. Well, my money got to go back and forward. And I got to figure out how to do that, and it's
Yeah.
easier said than done for people to be like, nah, you just got to think about, we got to break that and think about only moving forward and thinking about like your life, right? Because that's what you worked for. No, I came from somewhere and we have that deeply
Yeah.
embedded in us, right? And it's very difficult to say, I can't, my money can't go back into my family when they need it. I struggle with that, as you can see,
Yeah.
as we have this
Yeah.
conversation,
Yeah.
So, on top of the things that you mentioned, right? Us being the first generation to witness a lot of things at a rapid pace, we're still witnessing and having
Yeah.
access to all of this information at a rapid pace. We're also, as children of immigrants, still struggling with, how do I do this in the right way? There's guilt, there's, low key sometimes shame that comes with choosing you and only you. So it's hard.
Yeah.
It's tough. It's a tough experience.
Yeah. When you were just describing that, the first word I thought of was guilt. It's a
Yeah.
guilt sometimes of being further along than our parents were at our age. It's a
Mm,
guilt of having the freedom that they didn't have. It's the guilt of wanting to prioritize ourselves and maybe our relationships or our friendships over always having to kind of look back and say, okay, well, does my mom need help? Does my parents, what do they need from me? If you, God forbid, you are an oldest sibling or you have younger siblings that are depending on you as well, and like looking to you to be an example and be this person that they can always, kind of look at and say, okay, well, if all else fails, I have my older sibling that's gonna like help me out. It's a lot of
right.
pressure put on us that I think sets us apart from people who didn't have to go through the same thing. And just like you
Right.
said, like even me, I had friends growing. I went to a private school. I went to a private school in New York for college, and that was my first experience with people that looked like me. So many Black people, so many people of color, like
Yes.
in the student orgs, like we had like the Latin student org, we had the Black student union, we had like the Asian student, like all of us like mixed together, but even then, when I had other people who looked like me, I still felt othered because I was one of the few like first gen in the group that I was in. And
Mm-hmm.
it felt weird, like being like, oh, well, I care a lot about what my parents think. Like, I don't know if I want to
Yeah.
do this because I'm like thinking about them in the back of my head, whereas they're like, girl, just do your thing,
Mm-hmm.
like do you. And I'm like, I can't do that. So
Yeah.
it does set us apart, but we're not alone either at the same time. So it's like isolating,
Yeah.
but still, when you do meet your fellow like first gen, folks, and you just have that mutual understanding, it's so beautiful.
Yes. What a beautiful
You know,
experience to be seen, right?
yes, to be seen.
To be
Exactly.
seen. Because I can remember, I'm remembering right now a moment in college where like I used to have a friend in college who'd be like, "Yeah, Maribi's always gonna go home. She gotta go home to celebrate the dog's birthday because, again, community is so
Wow.
important." And I went to school like an hour away from my house, so it
Yeah.
was like I was still gonna go to my. I come from a big family, so yes, I went home for all the birthdays and all the yummy food that I couldn't get on campus, and I would. It wasn't every single weekend, but it was like the majority of the
Yeah.
weekends. There was always something that I felt responsible for showing up
Yeah.
to because my family is really united in
Yeah.
that way. And I hated when people would talk about me like that and make it into
Yeah.
a joke. It wasn't a joke for me. You clearly don't get it. Um,
Yeah.
so, you know.
I get it. I get it, girl. I get it. Okay. I would have been right on that New Jersey Transit with you on my way back home. So
Yes, we are gonna go celebrate my dog, okay? And we're gonna
it
have this
would.
Dominican cake and this tres leches, and you can't have none. I'm not bringing none for you. I could have brought you some, but
But that's
the
when you're not
slick
getting
mouth
none.
had to get in the way,
Hmm.
didn't it? Okay. Anyway, I'm so proud of me. I'm so proud of me.
Yes, as you should be, as you should. Real ones understand. But I would love for you to dive into what our inner teen is. Who is our inner teen? Because everybody and their mom knows what their inner child is and connecting with your inner child. But I have this image of like an inner teen who's like a little bit more like has a little bit more oomph to them, and they just are a little more edgier, and
Yes.
they're just a different version of ourselves that sometimes we kind of lose connection with. So if you can describe what our inner teen is, how we can reconnect with our inner teen, and how you use
Right.
the inner teen framework in your work as a therapist, that'd be amazing.
Yeah. So the first thing I want to start with is I don't believe, in my opinion, that we leave the versions of ourselves like behind. So they just evolve. Like
Mm-hmm.
that's why, connecting with your inner child is important because your childhood affects you to a point that it still affects you throughout the journey of your life. Just like your
Mm-hmm.
adolescence is still a big part of, right, who you evolve into as an adult
Mm-hmm.
because experiences happen in those spaces of your life that were meaningful and you're constantly trying to either rework those experiences
Mm-hmm.
or we think about it through the trauma lens, but I think about it even in like, so I love that you mentioned like our teens are a little spunkier, right? That's
Mm-hmm.
probably the angst teen, like, right, that's your typical
Angsty.
version of the angsty
Mm-hmm.
teen, right? That's the period of your life where you really begin to question everything around you, right? My parents are people, I don't like the way you did that, right? Versus when you're a child, you just accept, and you just kind of move through life, and you're told what to do, and you're, and that teenage age, you're beginning to be like, that doesn't make any sense. Why do you want me to do it like that? I think it would be better if I could do it like this, right? And I think when I am using the inner teen framework, I'm really trying to get us to tap into that curiosity, that exploration, that, inquisitive version of yourself that really was thinking about these things for the first time. You get to do that continuously in your life.
Mm-hmm.
You get to ask that question of, who do I want to be, right? How do I want to present myself to the world? What does my style look like, right? What does it mean for me to want to be attracted to this group of friends? Like, do I want them as my friends? Well, maybe I don't. Maybe I want these people. You get to
Mm-hmm.
do that continuously in your life. You are not set in stone, right? And that's the beauty
Yeah.
of being human. So I really feel like connecting with your inner teen is kind of like connecting with the most authentic version of the human experience, if you ask me, because you're just questioning and you're curious and you're trying things on. You're putting the outfit on, you're taking it off, and you're trying to figure out what's most comfortable. Why am I doing this, right? Um, and I don't think that we view the teen spirit in that way. I think we only kind of see the side of it that's like, my kid doesn't want to listen to me. They don't want to be around me, right? Or if you're an educator, like these kids don't. They want to do whatever they want to do. They don't
Mm-hmm.
respect authority, right? Um, and okay, why? Why don't they respect authority? They've
Yeah.
got questions too, and they've got really, really interesting thoughts about what they see through their lens and through their experience. So, for me, I still think that in adulthood, we get to do that. We get to play around with that idea of who do I
Mm-hmm.
want to be? Who do I want to evolve into? You know? Can I be
Yeah.
playful? Yeah, like I don't want it to be serious all the time, right? Like I get to have fun. I get to experience joy. I get
Mm-hmm.
to choose joy over whatever's happening. And it doesn't mean that I'm being avoidant. It just means I need a break right now, right? And so that's how I use the inner teen framework as much as possible when working with adults. And that's my approach to
Mm-hmm.
working with teens when I'm in the office with them. So it's interesting. Sometimes I
I
low key
love that.
feel, yeah, right? Sometimes I low key feel like, am I like immature because I want to have fun? Because I feel like at some point when we got deeper into adulthood, somebody told us we couldn't do that. Like responsibility doesn't look fun, right? You're supposed to know who you are. You're supposed. This is the way you dress, and this is the way you do this, and this is the way you.
Hmm.
Nah, I get to switch it up when I want to. And that's the beauty of being an adult is like now I have the autonomy and the space and I have more control in my life to be able to explore the things that I wish I was able to do then now. So,
Yeah, absolutely. And it sounds to me like the inner teen is actually very observant, extremely
mm,
observant, because they're watching the world around them. They're intaking that information, but they're also questioning it. And I think
yeah.
sometimes as adults, we can become jaded or
Mm,
complacent of
yes.
why things are the way they are, where the inner teen is constantly just like, well, why? Like their main thing is why, right? Why? Instead of just being like, well, this is how it is.
Yep.
And I think sometimes when we are so exhausted and not truly listening to what our mind and body is telling us and being connected to those innate reactions that we have, we can just start to kind of accept things for what they are instead of questioning, am I
Mm,
happy? Is this who I want
right.
to be? Is this where I want to live? You know, I think even as someone who grew up in the suburbs but moved to New York at a pretty young age at 18, and I've been here for years, I'm like, I'm in this era too of like, is this where I want to stay? Like, is this where I want to raise kids? Do I want to just this is doesn't have to be the only end all be all, right?
No.
Like I get to still choose. I get to still decide if this is what I want to do. And I think that's kind of like your inner teen guiding you in a way that's like still supporting who you are as
Yes.
an adult, but still advocating for you and making sure your needs are being met too.
Right.
So
And
the
the inner
curiosity is helpful.
Yes, it is helpful. And the inner teen has this desire to want to make their own choices that are different than the choices that are being made for them,
Right.
right? Obviously, when you're a teenager, you don't have the full scope of understanding why your parents make the choices that they make for you. But there's this like, I just wish I could do it the way I want to do it, right? And now in adulthood, you do get to make the choices that you think are best for you, whether or not you've seen that choice made before. Okay. But so back to that immigrant experience where there
Mm-hmm.
are a lot of things that we've never seen our folks do. We get to make different choices, whether you've seen it before or not, right? You get to try it. And if it doesn't work, it doesn't work, but you get to
Mm-hmm.
try it. And when I
Yeah.
think about, adult roles in our society right now, like I want to give a big shout out to those social activists because I feel like they're totally tapped in to that inner teen, right? Where they
Mm-hmm.
don't accept the system for what it is and they want to push it to
Yeah.
be better, right? Um, and they're doing it in the best way possible in the effort to just envision, to use their curiosity and creativity and their
Mm-hmm.
innovation to envision a different world where we get to be happier, right? And I love the work that they do, and it's challenging work, and it's challenging to be that in adulthood for the reasons that you mentioned, right?
Mm-hmm.
We do get jaded, I'm not like yeah, I've gotten jaded. I am jaded in certain
Mm-hmm.
aspects. And you choose whatever you just think is easier because life is so difficult. So it's like, do I also want this sector of my life to be difficult too? Um, it's
Mm-hmm.
challenging managing adulthood, but I encourage us to tap into that inner teen every once in a while to get a spark of that joy, a spark of that energy of being able to say,
Yeah.
what do I want my life? I want to dream, actually. I was a little bit of a daydreamer when I was a teen, like big time. I loved reading, I loved writing. And I just was like always thinking about what kind of life do I want for myself where I can envision being the happiest version of myself? We get to do that in every stage of our life. I don't want us to forget that.
Yeah. Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. So much light that you just shed on that part of ourselves that sometimes we, I think, judge a little bit too much, especially maybe if you had a teenage era that felt really tumultuous or challenging, or you felt awkward, or maybe you were like the weirdo or whatever it is. We beat up that version of ourselves so much. A lot of times when
Yeah.
we think about like the cringe version of ourselves, we're talking about our inner teen. And I feel like we need to give our inner teen more grace and be a little
Yes.
bit more kind to that version of ourselves instead of being like, oh, I was the ugly duckling, or I didn't have friends, or this or that, or, I wanted to join a sports team, but I wasn't good enough. And we have so much critique for the inner teen when they were just trying their best. They were just trying
Yes.
to, take on the world around them and still like process this new information. But, you know,
I love that. Trying their best, right, with the information that they had at
yeah,
hand, which we don't have
exactly.
much, and, show grace for the fact that they're trying to survive, right? And
Mm-hmm.
sometimes we forget what it's like to survive high school. Like, yeah, you do want to fit in because life is hard when you're the kid that's sitting by yourself in the lunchroom that doesn't have any friends. It's not always
Mm-hmm.
easy to, forge your own path.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, having grace for the versions of yourself that did something just because everybody else was doing it, because you just wanted to experience something quote unquote normal, some typical part of the experience, and you wanted to
Mm-hmm.
make sure you got it, right? And so you're
Yeah.
filling that need the only way you know how, and you don't have many tools at that age. So, I think when I connect with my inner teen, I love how you said showing grace for our inner teen. I connect with that version of myself that I'm just like, girl, I see
Mm-hmm.
you. I get it now. You were
Mm-hmm.
just trying to make your life easier too. In the same way that as adults, we make decisions that maybe go against a little bit of our values because we just want to make life easier.
Yeah.
We just
Yeah.
want to make life easier. That's part of the complexity of being in this human experience. Do we want everything to be hard? Like, no.
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
So that having grace and mercy for yourself, that kindness to yourself, because
Yeah.
nobody understands you the way you understand you. And you know the reason why you make those choices if you're real with yourself, right?
That's so true. That's true. Sometimes we don't recognize it until retrospect, and then we realize, oh, I was protecting myself, or oh,
Hmm.
I was advocating for myself, even though it didn't look like it at the time. So, um, one of the questions I want to ask is how do we embrace being the first in our family without taking on that superwoman or strong woman archetype? Because sometimes it's kind of a play on of like, oh, I was the first person in my family to get a master's degree or to finish college or to buy a house or to get
Right.
married. But then sometimes we attach on the strong woman archetype of like having to do it all ourselves or feeling isolated in that experience and not asking for
Mm,
help or feeling like we are under a lot of pressure to overperform or overachieve.
right.
How
Right.
would you say, how can we balance the two?
Ooh, that is the work I'm doing right now, like literally
Mm,
in this stage of my life. I'm thinking of the word hyper
mm,
independence, and I've been
yeah.
writing a lot about, right, hyper independence, which is something I really had to shed a bit of. Because again, going back to the earlier part of our conversation, kind of bringing it back, right, financially speaking, there's a lot that I'm a single woman. So for me, there's a lot that I'm experiencing alone that my parents didn't experience alone at this age, right? So there was a pride in being the first to get a master's, the
Mm-hmm.
first to get this kind of job, the first to, right? And, but it was a heavy load. It is a heavy load. So, or there was a lot of pride in being a superwoman. And then I would get called, I remember like dating in my 20s, the feedback that I was constantly getting was like, you're super intimidating because it was like, nah, I don't need you to do that for me. Like, nah, I could do it. I could do it. I could do everything by myself. First of all, no, I can't. I've never done anything by myself if I'm sitting here,
Mm-hmm.
like realistically speaking.
Yeah.
Um, you know, and reminding myself that I'm not a superhuman and I don't want to be. I don't. I don't want to be. I want to have help. I want to live a softer life. I want to experience more joy because when I was in that superwoman archetype that everybody bigged up, and so I had this like big S on my chest and I was so proud of it, I was sad. I was hurt a lot. You know, I lived a hard life by choice, because I wanted to keep up with the pride of like, I could do it by myself. Okay, sis, but you also have a goal to be married. You trying to do that by yourself too? Because that's two people that you have to collaborate with and that you have to try to learn to trust and let into your most vulnerable parts of your life and live with.
Mhm.
So I'm in that stage of life where it's like learning how to let people in, let them be helpful to me, express my needs, right? Trust that they can fulfill my needs, that I don't have to fulfill all of my needs alone, that I deserve help because I need it and I'm going to need it for the rest of my life.
Mhm.
Like the idea that I don't need community is so weird because I grew up in community. Everything my parents did was in community. And now I'm coming back to the sense of like, no, community is where things happen, where my healing gets to happen, where I can experience joy, where I get to express my sadness and find support. I don't have to do this, all of this alone.
Yeah.
Life is too hard to do by
Yeah.
yourself, right? So again, I'm hoping that I answered the question because I just feel like I like went on a
I
right,
think you did. I definitely think you did.
right.
And so many of us
Um,
can relate to that.
yeah, and I think there we got this messaging of like you can do this by yourself. I remember hearing that language not even that long ago from my parent. No, Maribi, but you could do it. You could do it by yourself. And it's like it was a trigger for me, low key, where I was like, I don't want to.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
don't want to because it's nicer and it feels lighter when I can do it with somebody else. And yes, I could do it by
Yeah.
myself, but I also want to hear that you're going to be there for me if I need it. And in that
Right.
case, I don't necessarily need a romantic partner. I also need to hear, Marivi, you could do it on your own. And if something happens, like if that toilet breaks in that new condo and you ain't got it, I got it for you, right? Like that's what I want to
Yeah.
hear,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
that I can help
Yeah.
you and I'm here to support you,
Yeah.
because I need to hear those words, right?
Yeah.
I know I can
Yeah.
do it, but I also want to know that like you're gonna be there to help me and that I don't
Absolutely.
have to be by myself in every part of this experience. It's what a lonely experience too, to wear that S on your chest, which I wore for a very, very long time. And a confusing experience too, because you see other people getting help, right? So
Hmm. It I just appreciate that you were so honest and real with that because I think for a lot of us, we have watched our parents, especially our mothers, be the hyper independent one, even
ooh,
in marriages. Even if they were
mm-hmm.
married, they were still hyper independent.
Yes.
And I think it's triggering when you, like you said, you see other people getting the help that you needed. And it's like, well, why couldn't I ask for that? Why couldn't I get that? Don't I deserve that? Right. And then you realize it's like, goes back to the whole like inner child versus inner teen is that your inner child just wanted to do what was ever like sometimes not reactive at all, just kind of accepting of whatever the situation was or the treatment or the behavior, accepting of it because they didn't realize their own autonomy that they had, you know? And so, one thing that I always do is I encourage people who like struggle with not asking for help. I'm like, start small. Next time you're out with a friend, if you're the person that always makes the reservation, tell your friend to make it. Be like, hey, actually, can you
Yes.
pick out the place? Or if you feel like you're the person that's always planning, fall back a little bit. Even if that means like, if you're the person that's like, oh, I got to plan this, this, and that, it's my birthday or it's this person's birthday, let somebody else do it. Let someone else pick up the
Yes.
pieces. And if you find that if you can't take a step back and things are still able to run and function, that means that you're overperforming in those
Absolutely.
areas. Like if you
And
can't take a step back, if you basically are absent and things go like completely like haywire, that's probably an indicator that you're overperforming. That could be in your relationship. If you're the person that's maintaining your entire home, the functioning of your entire home, like groceries are going to go bad and stuff like that is not going to get put away or whatever because you're the default person, you're probably over functioning in that role.
mm-hmm.
And then it's
Mm-hmm.
like, okay, now you have the information by taking a step back. And I think some of us are afraid to see what we're going to get if we don't just keep doing it. So we just continue to
Mm,
do it because we're like, well, who is going to catch me? Who is going to have my
right,
back? Right? I'm afraid to
right.
see the other side of that.
And, reminder, hyperindependence is a branch of anxiety, right? And anxiety is wanting to have control to be able to manage the outcome of something. Another thing that I've had to work on is understanding that control is a little bit of an illusion. I don't really have the power or control to figure
Yeah.
out what's happening in the future anyhow, right? And something that I tell myself is like, it's going to be okay. So I love this example of the friend with the reservation, and because so many people,
Mm-hmm.
right? And the planning, like, it's okay if I don't plan this one. And then if I don't have the best time ever at this party, I'm gonna survive it. That's not an actual dangerous situation, right? My
Yeah.
safety is not
Yeah.
actually like, so where are the spaces where anxiety is helpful, right? And you actually need to be mindful of certain things because of safety, right? And
Mm-hmm.
like keeping yourself literally alive, and others alive. And where's the space where like it's not that deep and you're
Mm-hmm.
gonna be okay, and regardless of how it turns out, you know, trust your
Yeah.
partner with doing the laundry that day. If your clothes got shrunk, honey, like it's okay. It's gonna suck, and now you gotta buy a new wardrobe maybe, but like it's okay,
Yeah.
right? To allow someone else to practice helping you. Because we don't also like when you wear that S on your chest, and I love that you brought up our mothers who were married and still hyper,
Mm-hmm.
independent, because, right, I talk about this in sessions sometimes with folks who are struggling in their relationships. It's like, why don't you let your boyfriend try that one? Just let him try it. Like, it's okay
Yeah.
if he messes him
Yeah.
up, and show him grace and kindness, right? Because, and I'm using a heterosexual relationship as in this example,
Right.
right? Because that's typically where I hear a lot about this. It's like, okay, but if he never gets the opportunity to try to do the dishes, right? Does it have to be done in your way? Just let him get it clean, let him practice.
Yeah.
And then you can insert
Yeah.
your tips if necessary, but
Right.
allowing people the space to practice showing up for you. They're not going to get it right
Right.
all the time, and it's not going to
Yeah.
be perfect, right? But if you allow them the space to practice, eventually they'll get there and they'll figure out how to show up for you the way that you need to be shown up for,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
So if you don't give
Absolutely.
people that space and that opportunity, then
Yeah.
they can't do it for you. And you're too busy trying to like pull the reins, like,
Yeah. And that too, like if you do give them the space to show up for you, or if they kind of don't show up at all, then
that's
you have the information
information.
to be
Mm-hmm.
like, okay, well, I gave you the space, I gave you the opportunity, I still don't have my needs met. Then you can say, all right, I'm going to do this because my needs are not being met here.
Mm-hmm.
You have the choice to stay in that type of like situation or dynamic. If it's not serving you, now
Yeah,
now you have proof at least that you've given that person a chance to show up for you.
absolutely. Absolutely. So, you deserve to be supported. You deserve to be taken care of as well.
Mhm.
These are words I wish my mom like could hear at that time in her life. Like, you don't have to do this all. I know your mom told you that this is what womanhood looks
Mhm.
like, where you have to do it all. And now you have
Yeah.
this ambition. My mom is super ambitious. Both of my parents are, right? And so like, and she wanted to make money, and she wanted to start a business, and she wanted to
Yeah.
go back to school. Girl, my mom really did do it all. And I got to see her. I don't know how she did it now that I think about it, right? And
Yeah.
I wish somebody in her life told her, like, you could let your husband try to, like, just ask him to,
Yeah. Yeah.
clean the dishes tonight. I don't know if she ever did and had those conversations, but for myself, when I think about, my friendships, my future partnership, or future husband in my case, right? Um, I that's going to be an expectation. I need to know that we can
Mhm.
help each other, because what a heavy load for one person in the relationship to have.
Right.
And that's where resentment brews. And that's
Right.
where, and then we don't have compassion for one another, and we don't have space for empathy and understanding,
Mhm.
because there's so much on my plate that culture put on there, that other people, tradition put on there, that I didn't ask for and I didn't know I could question. Shout out
Hmm.
to the inner teen, right?
Yeah.
And I didn't know I could change. I didn't know I can make a different choice. So,
Yeah.
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 I'm proud of
I
millennial
feel that.
women. We've done a lot of
We've
work
done
of
a hell
like,
of a good job.
ooh, of learning new ways to think and do things,
It's not
right?
easy.
It's not. It's not. We're making
Yeah.
different choices.
We are. We are definitely making different choices. And I'm proud of the women, especially that I know, that are like, I would rather be by myself than choose a non supportive partner. Or I would rather
Mm,
decide to be single than have a partner who's not going to 100% support me or 100%
right.
be there for me. And I appreciate that because I'm like, that's if you were raised your entire life of doing things for other people or being the person that has to be doing the whether it's the physical labor, the emotional labor, whatever it is, you need somebody that's going to see that and not take advantage of that. You deserve someone that's going to be able to lighten your load and soften your load and
Yes.
make your life easier in a way that is not just superficial, right?
Right.
So I think that is as challenging as it is good to be selective. It's good to decide this is what I want. This is what I deserve, right?
Yeah.
And
And you can have
um,
it.
you
You can
can.
have
I've been
it.
seeing videos of like people saying every firstborn daughter or like first gen daughter needs an acts of service husband or needs an acts of service like a partner because they grew up being like the parent or they grew up like having all these responsibilities, so they are not settling for anyone who cannot at least show up for them in a way that makes them feel reassured and that gives them the support that they need. And
Yeah.
yeah.
I hear that. I hear that. So I'm the first girl born in my family, which means I'm the first
Mhm.
granddaughter. I'm my parents' first and only daughter because I've got three other brothers. And like
Oh wow, okay.
I'm the eldest girl cousin, right? And there
Mm.
is a lot of pressure there. So when I think about partnership, I think about there are days where I'm exhausted for
Hmm.
many reasons, and there's layers, and there's this role that I play in my family. And maybe I only have 20 today. I need to trust that you could show up with the other 80
Yeah.
and that you could see
Yeah.
me and what I go through and say, girl,
Yeah.
you went through a lot today. And not just
Yeah.
be like, and that's
Right.
what you're supposed to do. And
Right.
okay, no, I need you
Yeah.
to see me, right? Because
Yeah.
what in an intricate role, that I navigate, and vice
Hmm.
versa. You want me to be able to see you, and women are trained to see you, right? Because
Hmm.
I could talk about this for days and hours, right?
We are definitely trained to.
Okay. Our literal like survival depended on understanding how to navigate male presence in our life. We depended on you socially for so much because of the way the system was set up. We are trained to see you and navigate around you. And now we're
Hmm.
asking for a little bit of that too, because guess what? In 2024, we're both providers.
Period.
We're both providers.
Yeah.
We're both providers and we're both leaders, right?
Yeah.
And we're both ambitious, right? And so, how do we adapt this to 2024 standards? How do we do this for each other?
Yeah.
You
That's got to be
know?
part two of this conversation.
Ooh,
I think we need like a second part because
me too.
that is really these are the conversations people are having over and over and over again, and they really are wanting to have some clarity behind the questions that you just raised, right? And specifically for millennial women and women of color, women who are products of immigrants, Black women, Latina women, I think that is a big, big, big question that we're having. So we will
Yeah.
definitely say that for hopefully a part two. But um,
Yeah.
I have one
Yeah.
last question for you, Maribi, is what does softness mean to you as a Dominican woman?
Oof. Um, I'm thinking right now of more joy. I'm also thinking about how hard, like, I have fought to get to this place where I can feel lighter, right? Like there's a fight to
Mm-hmm.
softness, where I get to
Mm.
be more vulnerable and I get to be authentically who I am. I get to take the shield off just because I want to be human. So softness equates to humanity for me,
Mm.
um, of just being and being allowed to be and being seen and
Yeah.
understood even when I'm not great,
Yeah.
and showing myself grace and expecting others to show me grace when I need it. So
Yeah.
that breaks a lot of cycles, at least in my world. And if I have a daughter or a son, or if I have a child, right, like I get to show that to another person that you get to be human and I get to love every part of you. That's what softness means to me.
I love that. Thank you so much. Well, we have just a few rapid fire questions, really
Ooh,
fun. We're going to end it off. We're going to end it off with some rapid fire, no brainers, no right or wrong answers. So, you ready?
okay. All right.
Okay. Okay. First question. What is your favorite thing about living in Miami?
The
The
beach,
beach.
and beach
The beach.
culture. Yeah.
Jealous, jealous,
Girl,
jealous.
come. Just visit me. It's
Cries a New
fine.
Yorker. I know. I'm girl. That might be the next. Listen, I'm ready. I'm ready for my suburban mom era. Okay, so
Yeah. Well, and that's the fun part too. It's a city and beach.
yeah,
So,
I love that. I love that.
mhm.
Miami might be next. Okay. Next question. Your favorite Dominican dish?
Oh, sancocho. Sancocho.
Sancocho.
Sancocho. White rice.
Yes, I love
Aguacate.
sancocho. Got to have that always.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
um, third question is, what is your favorite way to decompress after a super long day?
I love to walk and take walks and blast music in my ears, something I did often as a teenager,
Mm,
and just be in that world for a bit. So when I first
long
became a
walks.
therapist, it was like necessary. I had to take a long walk after every
Yeah,
single night when I was kind of navigating the beginning of
yeah,
that world. So that's my favorite way to decompress. And
yeah,
talking with friends and laughing.
yeah. I love that. Okay, next question is, what books, movies, and or albums represent some parts of your upbringing when you were, I would say specifically in your 20s and 30s? Like, what are the books, albums, or movies that resonate the most with that
The
chapter of your life?
miseducation of Lauren
I knew you
Hill.
were
Like
gonna
you,
say that. I feel like I knew
girl,
you were gonna say
okay. Fun
that.
fact, it was like my first album I ever bought with like money I went to like FYE with. I got birthday money and I
Hmm.
went to go buy the Miseducation of Lauryn Hill, and I wasn't even old enough to really understand that album. And she a Jersey girl. Like let's put
She is.
okay,
She's from
she's
like West Orange
yeah, she
or
is.
East
She's from the
Orange. Yeah.
Oranges
Yeah. Yep.
and Newark area. The
Hmm.
Miseducation of Lauren Hill for sure. I'm thinking about books. There's a poem specifically by Elizabeth Acevedo, Hair. I saw her perform it live and I cried. I just connected with it in such a deep way. So I'm gonna point that out. And she has amazing literature too. She's a great writer, Dominican American writer. Um, and Juno Diaz's Drown. That book did a lot for me
Mm.
too in my
Mm.
in my 20s. I reread it so much. I shared it so much. Um, yeah. If you know, you know. Also, a
Yeah.
book based in Jersey, a
I
neighborhood
know.
that I,
Yeah.
did my big one in. So, Do Not Diaz is Drowned, The Miseducation of Lauren Hill, Elizabeth Acevedo's Hair.
Love that.
Yeah.
Very, very distinct and relevant. pieces of work. Okay, and last question is, what would you title this chapter of your life right now?
It's so full. That's why my eyes were just kind of like, what a good question. What will I title this chapter of my life? I'm calling this year my year of building. Last year was my year of
Mm,
preparation. This is my year of building. I'm working actively towards the life that I want. I'm
hmm.
building right now. It's cool.
Love that. Thank you so much, Maribi, for being here. We had such a good time talking to you. So many gems were dropped. You shed light on a lot of topics that I think all of us wanted to hear. And thank you for seeing us, and we see you. So we appreciate you.
Oh,
Please let us know how we can follow you and stay connected with you.
yes. Follow me on Instagram at Project Chula. And everything that I'm doing, I will post up there. So you can keep up with me. You can keep up to find out if I have an opening. I can only see clients in the state of Florida right now. So folks that are
Mhm.
residents of Florida, but I'm going to expand to other states. Hopefully, that's part of my process right now. And if I'm doing a workshop or something, you'll follow me there. So
So thank you so much.
thank
Thank
you
you
for
for being
having
here.
me. This is super
Thank you.
fun.
No, I had such a good time talking to you. We'll
Yeah,
see you
for
soon.
real. Bye.
To stay connected, join Sadie Baddies on Instagram, Pinterest, Twitter, and more, and sign up for our monthly newsletter on SaddieBaddies.com to stay in the loop. Sending you hella love and stay soft, baddie.